guess I gotta come up with the sort of the same intro, but it's deja vu, or as the French like to say, hey, that already happened, as I just previewed the East Final in the 2023 CFL Playoffs, where you could see that video where deja vu happened there, or it's going to happen there, as the Toronto Argonauts once again will be hosting the Montreal Alouettes. Well, now let's shift our focus out west for the West Final, and once again the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. They'll be hosting the BC Lions, as this Calgary Stampeders fan still was disappointed that the Calgary Stampeders did not pull off the upset against the BC Lions, but not surprising. And let's say the Calgary Stampeders had a successfully tough season, let's put it that way. So hi there, it's Brett Hornby here, and welcome back to my YouTube channel, and welcome back to my On the Road to the Grey Cup videos, where I preview the games in the 2023 CFL Playoffs, right on the East Final. So this is video 4 of 5, as this is the last game that we played before the big one next Sunday for the 110th Grey Cup in Hamilton, Ontario. So we will be having the BC Lions will be going to Winnipeg to take on the Winnipeg Blue Bombers again this season. So how this one shakes down is this game will be on Saturday, November 11th. This will be a 4:30 kickoff Mountain Time, or it'll be 5:30 kickoff Central Time in Winnipeg at IG Field. So how did we get there? Well, the BC Lions, they defeated the Calgary Stampeders 41-30. So as a Calgary Stampeders fan, I'm going to say Calgary looked better against the BC Lions this year than they did last year, but ultimately could not finish off the deal. So if we take a look at the quick numbers when it comes to the who stood out in this game, well, obviously Vernon Adams Jr., he stood out big time. For the BC Lions, he was 28 of 39 for passing for 413 yards, and he threw for 2 touchdowns. Well, he was also the leading rusher on the BC Lions, as he ran for 54 yards on 7 carries, and he ran in 3 touchdowns. So Vernon Adams was a part of 5 touchdowns. Leading receiver, well, Keon Hatcher, he has Calgary's number. He made 9 catches for 195 yards. With a touchdown, Javon Cotoy, he had 63 yards receiving on 6 catches for a touchdown. And the other receiver, he only had 2 touchdown passes, then Vernon Adams had 3 touchdowns. And then Woods was the leading tackler with 11 sacks. And then it was Gary Peters who had that interception early in the first quarter. So that's the quick numbers for the BC Lions. Calgary Stampeders, well, Jake Maier, actually, I'm going to say he looked better than he did the last few games, including last year's playoff game. He was 23 for 34 for passing for 304 yards. He threw for 2 touchdowns, but he threw for 2 interceptions, but that last interception came with 10 seconds left in the game. Leading rusher actually was Kenny Gary. Calgary didn't abandon the running game this year. He had 75 yards on 14 carries, but no touchdowns. And then Reggie Bagleton, he was the lead receiver for the Calgary Stampeders. He had 112 yards on 8 carries and a touchdown. Markin Michel also had a touchdown for Calgary, as he had 5 catches for 66 yards. And then Cole Tucker, he had 1 catch, or 2 catches for 13 yards and the touchdown. And then Cameron Judge was the leading tackler. He had 8 tackles and 1 sack in this one. So that was the gist of the Calgary Stampeders. You can also mention that Rene Paredes had to settle for 5 field goals. So that was also the reason why the Calgary Stampeders were able to pull off the upset, is the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, the BC Lions, cashed it in when the Calgary Stampeders didn't. So that was the quick stat summary of the West semifinal win for the BC Lions. So now when it comes to the records, this game I'm going to say is going to be a lot closer than the East Final is going to be, just look at the hard numbers. Well, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, they finished first in the West Division and had a bye. They had a 14-4 record, so they weren't too far behind the Toronto Argonauts. While the BC Lions, they finished second in the West Division with a 12-6 record. So we got two pretty good teams going at it with this one. And then if we break down the records even more, well, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, they were 8-1 at home, and we're going to find out who delivered that one loss for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers at home. And then they were 10-2 versus the West Division. Well, the BC Lions, they were just as good on the road as they were at home with a 12-6 record. They were 6-3 on the road, and they were 8-4 versus the West Division. So when it comes to the season series, these two teams played each other 3 times. And I'm going to say 2 games were blowouts, and 1 game, I'm going to say, was a classic. And if we get that today, this will be one of the best West Finals that the CFL has seen in a long time. So for the season series, we've got to go back to week 3. This game was in Winnipeg. Well, the BC Lions were that one team that defeated the Winnipeg Blue Bombers at home. As the BC Lions, they defeated the Winnipeg Blue Bombers 30-6. Winnipeg didn't start off as strong in this one, as they had a time where they lost to BC, and then they lost to Ottawa as well in overtime. So that game was at Winnipeg. And then this game was in Winnipeg as well, as the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, they got their revenge on the BC Lions for week 9, as Winnipeg won 50-14. So we had 2 convincing wins from one side. So the season series came down to week 18, and I'm going to say this game came a long way to determine who was hosting this game. Well, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, they won a 34-26 thriller in overtime. And I recall that game, it came to the point that BC looked like they were going to score the go-ahead touchdown, and with no time left in the fourth quarter, and had a game-saving tackle. So that game was definitely a huge thrill in week 18. So Winnipeg did take this series 2-1. I'm going to say week 18. I think this game is going to be closer to the week 18 game as opposed to weeks 3 and 9. So when it comes to playoff history, we'll take a look at the last 3 games between these 2 teams. Well, it was just this last year, as I mentioned, with the deja vu, or hey, that already happened. Last year's West Final, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, they were hosting the BC Lions, and they won that one 28-20. 20-20, is that to say, for Winnipeg to go to Regina and take on the Toronto Argonauts at last year's Grey Cup, looking for their three-peat, but Toronto ultimately came through, but Winnipeg won last year's West Final. And then in 2016, this was the West semi-final, as BC and Winnipeg played each other. This game was in Winnipeg, and actually the BC Lions, they won that one 32-31. As in that game, it was whoever was going to play the Calgary Stampeders. And then in 2011, at this time, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers were in the East Division when Ottawa wasn't a part of the league. Well, in 2011, this was the 99th Grey Cup in Vancouver, and the BC Lions, they won the Grey Cup at home against the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, winning 34-23. So recent history, BC has got the couple games, but recent history so favors the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Now when it comes to the last playoff wins, well, the last playoff win was both teams with their recent wins, as the Winnipeg Blue Bombers' last playoff win was last year's West Final when they defeated the BC Lions at home 28-20, and then the BC Lions' last playoff win was last week in the 2023 West semi-final when they defeated the Calgary Stampeders 41-30 at home. So who has the edge? Well, I can spend a little more time breaking this one down compared to the East Final, because I feel that this game will be closer for both sides. Or quarterback, the CFL.ca say gives a slight edge to BC. I call this a push. I mean, Vernon Adams Jr. had one heck of a game last week against the Calgary Stampeders. But let's not doubt Zach Claros either for Winnipeg. So I'm going to say whoever has the better game, I think both quarterbacks have the ability to take this game over. So I give that a push. Running back, well, by far this favors the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, especially with Brady Oliveira, as he ran over 1,500 yards, most productive running season by a Canadian running back since John Cornish. Receiver, well, let's go favorite the BC Lions because they got Keon Hatcher and Javon Gotoy, Justin McInnes. There's question marks. I haven't checked the depth chart, but I heard questionable with Dalton Schoen and Nick Dembski. That also could favor the Winnipeg or the BC Lions and receiver as well if they don't play or they're not 100%. Offensive line, this still gives it to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. They still got Stanley Bryan on the one end, but it's still a close matchup. Now on the other side of the ball, so I'm going to say the rushing game will favor Winnipeg. The receiving game will favor BC. Quarterback, I'm going to say is a push. If I have to pick one right now, I'm going to still give the eye on Vernon Adams Jr., as I think he has a little more to prove for his legacy. On the defensive line, I give that a push on both sides. I mean, this also depends on if Willie Jefferson is also playing in this game as well, but Matthew Betts still is the sack machine. And then the linebackers, well, he's still going to give this one to Winnipeg. I mean, they still got Adam Bighill on there. And the defensive backs, well, Winnipeg has that one, especially led by Demario Houston. So, defensive side of the ball, Winnipeg still has a stronger defense in my mind. However, I do think it's a little more vulnerable. The return game, well, I'm going to still give this the edge to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers as Janarian Grant is back returning. BC has Terry Williams, but Janarian Grant is the better returner. And then the kicking game, I'm going to give this one to the BC Lions. Sean White over Sergio Castillo. Yeah, he does have a longer leg, but Sean White has the longer resume. So now, I was also spend more time giving this as a closer matchup. This team will win if, so we'll look at Winnipeg first. Winnipeg will award if Zach Claros can work with who he has and how healthy their receivers are. Let's say if Dalton Schoen or Nick Dembski play in this game, and then that also comes to the next point. Overcome injuries with key players nicked up. So Winnipeg will win if they can play hurt. And then the secondary comes up big with interceptions. Let's say if Demario Houston gets a pick six. So I'm going to say Winnipeg if Zach Claros can do his thing. If their receivers, if their big game receivers are healthy enough, and if their secondary can make some big plays. BC will win. Well, if Vernon Adams Jr. did what he did to my Calgary Stampeders and the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, I think they'll win just on that alone. As he threw for over 400 yards and ran in 3 touchdowns himself. I'm going to say also if the Winnipeg Blue Bombers get snuffed out by the BC defense with their running game. Their running game is going to be more of a challenge for the BC defense this week than last week with Kadeem Carey. And also, I always say as a CFL fan and from personal experience, going to a game in Saskatchewan and Winnipeg, Saskatchewan, I say, is the most hostile, with Winnipeg being behind second. Well, if BC can get ahead early and shut up the crowd at IG Field, I think that could also play a role for the BC Lions as well. So, I'm still anticipating a close one, and this one closer to that Week 18 game. So, with this game being played outside, I always have to take a look at the weather forecast, because that could play a role in Winnipeg in November. Actually, it's pretty decent looking at the weather forecast. There seems to be clearing, but windy, so might play a role in the kicking game on both sides. But a high of 1 degree, but with the game not starting until 5:30 in Winnipeg, and now that we're on standard time, it's going to be a little darker, and they're forecasting clear, cloudy periods coming in after midnight, but the game, I'm going to say, should be long gone by that time. and -3. So I'm going to say for November in Winnipeg, this is pretty good weather. So now, when it comes to my prediction, so let's bring out my Wiz Smart Bulb, as we'll have two colors here. If I think the Winnipeg Blue Bombers are going to win, I'll have that color. Or if I got the BC Lions, if it shows up, I have the orange for the BC Lions. So do I think it's going to go to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers? Are they going to be going back to the Grey Cup this year? Or will the BC Lions maybe pull off a mild upset? So who is it going to be? Let's just spin the wheel. Winnipeg or BC? Winnipeg, BC, Winnipeg, Calgary? I can only dream. Well, I think this is going to be a close matchup, but I actually am going to give this one to the BC Lions. I'll make this a little more orangish than the default orange, but I think this will go to the BC Lions. I think they'll win 31-28 in this one. I give that confidence about 50%. Why I think the BC Lions will win this one on the road? Well, it's been too long since the CFL has had any road teams win in the playoffs, and I think that's due to happen. Given some questionable, there were a lot of questionables when looking at the depth chart injury reports for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. There were a lot of questionables, and are they going to be 100%? Like say Dalton Schoen, Nick Dembski, Willie Jefferson. Then the other question is, will they try to tough it out, play, and not get hurt even more and not play in the Grey Cup? But after what I saw from the BC Lions last week against the Calgary Stampeders, and I think Vernon Adams Jr. is on a mission, and the game is decent. I mean, if the game was a little sloppy, I would probably favor that to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. So all those factors put together, I think the BC Lions will be going to the Grey Cup in 2023. But who do you have coming out of this matchup? Will Winnipeg be going back to their fourth straight Grey Cup in 2023 to look to get 3 out of 4? Or will the BC Lions, will they make their first appearance to the Grey Cup since 2011 when they won it at home? And obviously the winner of this one is off to the 110th Grey Cup in Hamilton, Ontario at Tim Hortons Field, and that will be a 4 p.m. kickoff Mountain or 6 o'clock in Hamilton. So anyway, close out, if I like to say, if you want to follow along this Calgary sports fans journey, just make sure you hit like, subscribe. I know I'm a little late at getting these videos done, but it was a long week and I was tired at the end of the day. And when you're middle-aged, sometimes you get home and plop yourself on the couch and then you sleep all night, or that happens. So at least I got the videos in. Who's going to win the West Final? Who do you think will win the East Final? And then next week I'll do my preview for the 110th Grey Cup, depending on who is going away. Will we have a repeat of Toronto and Winnipeg? Or will it be BC and Toronto, or BC and Montreal, or Montreal and Winnipeg? Those are the possibilities that Hamilton awaits for the Grey Cup. So I just want to say thanks for watching, enjoy the games this weekend, and I'll see you in the next video.